Hello and welcome to the final part of my policy comparisons for the 2022 federal election. I am your host, David. This is Auspol Explained, and hey, let's dive right in. You want to know some policy comparisons? You want to decide who do I want to vote for? Well, if refugees are part of that decision making, let's compare the policies between them. Let's dive in comparing the Liberal National Coalition, Labour, Greens and One Nation and see what the similarities and differences actually are.
The similarities between the Liberals and Labour are they're continuing the policy of indefinite detention of refugees in offshore detention centres like on Christmas Island or Manus and Nauru. If refugees come to Australia via boat, both parties will turn them back and refuse to settle them in Australia. These boat turnbacks are carried out by the military-led operation known as Operation Sovereign Borders. The differences between the two parties are the Liberals support temporary protection visas, whereas Labour doesn't, as they argue it leaves refugees in limbo, so wants to transition to a permanent visa arrangement. Labour has been critical of the living conditions of those in detention and says we should improve their medical care while they're being processed. Liberals previously cut the humanitarian intake from 18,750 places to 13,750 places over 4 years, back in 2020. But they have made an additional 16,500 places just for people fleeing Afghanistan. Labour, on the other hand, wants the humanitarian intake to be 27,000 and have an additional 5,000 places for the community sponsorship program. Greens' policy is quite different. They want to end boat turnbacks and establish the Australian Maritime Service to rescue people risking an ocean journey to get asylum. They want to increase the humanitarian intake of refugees to 50,000 a year, as well as an additional 20,000 permanent humanitarian places for those fleeing Afghanistan and another 20,000 for those fleeing Ukraine. They wish to create a program to allow for private sponsorship of 10,000 refugees per year in addition to our annual humanitarian intake. It'll be based off Canada's private sponsorship of refugees program. Greens want to end indefinite offshore detention, which they criticise for being cruel and costly, and change to a much more affordable onshore processing model, as well as create a time limit for that to ensure people can access safety and start new lives quickly instead of being held in detention far away from their family or a new community for several years. The cost of offshore detention, by the way, is over $358,000 a month per person on average, or $4.3 million per person held in Nauru. This has been gradually increasing over time. Many refugees have been held in indefinite detention for upwards of 7 or 8 years. They want to provide all refugees and people seeking asylum with access to adequate income support, working rights, healthcare, education, and cultural and settlement services. They also wish to abolish the temporary protection visas and replace them with permanent ones. They wish to establish an internal target for LGBTQ+ refugees, as Australia currently does for women at risk, and $60 million to establish a royal commission into Australia's onshore and offshore immigration detention facilities. One Nation's policies are that they want the refugee intake to be reduced for at least 5 years. One Nation also wants us to withdraw from the United Nations 1951 Refugee Convention that outlines the definition of refugees, their rights, and countries' responsibilities towards them.
And there you have it. Thank you so much for tuning in. I hope this has helped you learn. And, well, share, because there is less than a week until the election is done. So, hope you have decided who you want to vote for by now. If not, check out some other parties as well as my previous episodes. Thank you to all those who support me on Patreon. Thank you so much to everyone who, shared, liked, comment, or just enjoyed this in general. The clock is ticking to get out, vote, and get your democracy sausage, and I will see you at the polls.